Okay guys, we're going to cover chapter 28, reproductive system. I know that Miss Thompson's already covered this with you guys in class, but I just wanted to give you another opportunity to be able to review it. Remember that the reproductive system is the only system that is not essential to the life of an individual, but it does affect some of your other systems. The male and female reproductive organs produce and store specialized reproductive cells. These are called sex cells or gametes that combine to form new individuals. The reproductive organs also secrete hormones that play a major role in the maintenance of normal sexual function. Now, talking about the reproductive structures, these are known as the gonads. The gonads are the organs that produce the gametes, the egg and the sperm, as well as the hormones. Other parts of these structures are the ducts. These ducts receive and transport the gametes. There's also accessory organs which secrete fluids into these ducts. There's perineal structures that are collectively known as the external genitalia. Now here, guys, you can see the male and female genitalia. That's here. It's a kind of a cross section. The male is found on figure 28.1 and the female is 28.11, but you can see them here. The testes and the ovaries are what we would call the gonads. You can also see that there's many tubes and stuff and accessory structures that are here, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of these. Now, the male and female reproductive systems are functionally different. The female produces one gamete per month. It also is going to retain and nurture the zygote. Now guys, the zygote is a fertilized egg. It's when the sperm actually fertilizes the egg and it can develop into a baby. The male produces large quantities of gametes, however. It produces about 500 million sperm per day. So they're a little different in how they function. So we're going to talk about the male reproductive system first. With the male reproductive system, there's a little overview here. The gonads are going to be the testes. That's the sex organ. There is a system of ducts. These ducts are the epididymis, the ductus deferens, the ejaculatory duct, and the urethra. The accessory glands include the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, or Cowper's glands. Several supporting structures include the penis and the scrotum. Now, this picture, guys, is very similar to the one on 28.1. So if we talk about the scrotum, guys, this is cutaneous outpouching of the abdomen that supports the testes. Inside, you can see there's a vertical septum which divides the scrotum into two sacs. Each sac contains one testis. The dartus and the cremaster muscles, they're going to help regulate the testicular temperature that is required for sperm production. Sperm production is actually better below body temperature, so it's normally like 2 to 3 degrees below the core temperature. Now this is important. This is why they're found outside of the body. Now the testes, guys, are paired oval-shaped glands or gonads in the scrotum. The testes develop on the superior and posterior abdominal wall of the embryo. The seminal tubules, these are where the sperm cells are going to be made. These tubules are lined with serotol cells, Langding cells, and spermatogenic cells. Again, this can be various stages of developing sperm. The serotol cells secrete inhibin, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. The Langding cells are going to secrete testosterone. The secretion of testosterone at puberty leads to the development of the male secondary sex characteristics. So this would be things like hair growth, lowering or deepening of the voice, developing of their libido or sexual drive, stimulation of anabolism, where they're going to build more muscle and protein growth, and those would all be examples of secondary sex characteristics. Alright, the next thing we're going to talk about is spermatogenesis. With spermatogenesis, guys, this is found in 28.4. Diagram 28.4 in your book. Spermatogenesis is the formation of sperm. Genesis means beginning, and sperm, of course, is going to be what's being formed here. So with spermatogenesis, the spermatozoa are produced in the tubules by the sperm cells, by the sperm stem cells, which are called spermatozogonia. At the beginning of puberty, the anterior pituitary increases its secretion of the gonadotropins, the LH, the luteinizing hormone, and the FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone. The follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the serotonin cells and increases the rate of spermatogenesis, whereas LH stimulates the Leydig cells, which also are located between these tubules, and they secrete the hormone testosterone. Once the degree of spermatogenesis or sperm formation required for male reproductive function has been achieved, the serotonin cells release inhibin. Inhibin is a hormone that inhibits the release of FSH. So it's going to inhibit the follicle stimulating hormone, decreasing the formation of sperm. So guys, if you'll notice here, we talk about the sperm, it's going to divide into primary spermatocyte, a secondary spermatocyte, and then we actually will get a sperm cell. Each sperm stem cell we start with is going to divide into 4 unique sperm cells. Now you can also see this process here where it goes from 2N and we're halving the number of chromosomes. This is going to be what we call meiosis. Specifically, this type of meiosis is spermatogenesis because we are creating sperm in this case. Alright, now let's look at the ducts of the male reproductive system. The ducts of the testes, we have the seminiferous tubules. These are curled and twisted within the testes. There's the straight tubules. This is in the center of the testes. We also have the rete testes. It's a network of tubules in the center of the testes. Then we have the epididymis. The epididymis is a comma-shaped organ behind each testis. Each epididymis contains what we call efferent ducts, which receive the sperm from the actual testes themselves. These efferent ducts then empty into the ductus epididymis. The ductus epididymis is very tightly coiled tubule with some smooth muscle. Now the functions of the epididymis is to maintain and adjust fluid production. It also recycles damaged spermatozoas, okay, so if they're damaged sperm. But it's also a place where they store and protect spermatozoa until maturity, until the sperm is actually mature and ready to leave the body. The epididymis is where this maturing process takes place. Now, the ductus or vas deferens, this is also called the seminal duct, has 3 layers of smooth muscle. The ductus deferens loops a number of ways. It goes up behind the epididymis, over the pubic symphysis. It then penetrates the inguinal canal and enters the pelvic cavity. It goes over the urethra and lateral to the urinary bladder, down behind the bladder, and then it empties into the ejaculatory duct, also part of the urethra. Now, there's what we call a spermatic cord. This is a supporting structure of the male reproductive system. It's part of the ductus deferens that has blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels. We also see the cremaster muscle, which raises and lowers the scrotum, is going to take place, or is going to be present here. The spermatic cord passes through the inguinal canal. We also have the ejaculatory ducts. This is behind the urinary bladder, and it does contain some smooth muscle. This is where the duct from the seminal vesicle joins the vas deferens. We also then have the male urethra. This is the passageway for both urine and semen. We see here we have the prostate urethra. This is the most superior portion. It passes through the prostate gland. The membranous urethra is the middle portion. It passes between the pubic rami. And then you have the spongy or penile urethra, which empties to the exterior. So the urethra here, because it's a longer tube, is going to have kind of 3 sections to it. One thing to note, guys, is in this male reproductive system, the urethra does play 2 roles. It acts as part of the urinary system as well as the reproductive. Alright, so now, guys, if we look here at some of the accessory glands, you can see that it has the different urethras kind of given off here, the ejaculatory duct, and also the Cowper's gland. With these glands, or these sex glands, we have the seminal vesicle first, This is going to secrete an alkaline fluid, and it's about 60% of the total volume of semen. It contains fructose. This fructose is for energy for the sperm. It also has prostaglandins. This is to stimulate smooth muscle contractions. And it has clotting proteins called fibrogen. The alkalinity neutralizes the acidity of the male urethra and the female reproductive tract. So we can see here that it's going to neutralize the acidity of the urine if there's any left in the urethra, and it's also going to help the sperm when it first enters into the female, because the female structures, the vagina, is very acidic as well. We also see then we have the prostate gland. This is a small donut-shaped gland below the bladder. It surrounds the prostatic urethra. 25% of the ejaculate volume is created here by the prostate gland. Its fluid is milky, slightly acidic solution, and it contains citric acid for energy. It also has acid phosphatase, and it has some other enzymes. We then see the Cowper's glands. This is a pea-sized gland. It's below the prostate. The ducts open into the spongy urethra, and it secretes a protective alkaline mucus that decreases sperm damage in the urethra. So those are your accessory glands. Alright, next we have here is the penis. This is 28.10. With this structure, guys, we see that there's a root. This is the proximal portion, the bulb of the penis plus the curare, which attaches the penis to the pubic rami. The root is surrounded by skeletal muscle tissue, and this is for ejaculation. We see it has also a body. This contains the blood, sinuses, arteries, and veins. It also contains the spongy urethra, the underside. Sexual excitement causes the dilation of the penile arteries and expansion of these blood sinuses. This is a parasympathetic response. All this blood compresses the veins, which drain the penis, and blood gets trapped, and this is what we would call an erection. The glandus penis is the distal end. The prepubis or foreskin is loosely fitted skin that covers the glandus penis. During circumcision, this is surgically removed. Okay, so you can also see here, and guys, this is a cylindrical shape structure, and that's what we see here. This is the external genitalia. Alright, now let's switch gears and go to the female reproductive system. With the female reproductive system, it produces sex hormones and functional gametes. It protects and supports the developing embryo, and it nourishes the newborn infant. So an overview of the female reproductive system includes the ovaries. These are the gonads. The uterine tubes, also known as the fallopian tubes. The uterus, the vagina, the vulva, and the mammary glands are also considered part of the female reproductive system because they help support and nourish the newborn. So let's talk about the ovaries. The ovaries are located in the upper pelvic cavity on either side of the uterus. So we have two. It's held in place by a series of ligaments. The size and shape are about the size. Well, the size and shape are very similar to an unshelled almond. They produce mature secondary oocytes. This is the female gametes, and released one during each monthly ovarian cycle. This is what we call ovulation. They secrete the female hormones as well as estrogen, progesterone, inhibin, and relaxin. This particular picture, guys, here kind of shows you what the inside of the ovary looks like. And this is 28.13. Alright, so we see here the uterine fallopian tubes. These are also called the oviducts. They extend laterally from the uterus. The infundibulum is an opening or funnel-shaped portion which is close to the ovary. The fimbriae is finger-like projections which sweep the secondary oocyte into the tube. Oviducts contain smooth muscle. These smooth muscles help propel the ovum or egg towards the uterus. Some cells are also ciliated, and these also help transport the egg or ovum. The ampullae is the lateral 2/3 of the tube. It's the widest and longest. This is where fertilization is going to occur. So as fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube. The isthmus is the medial narrow part of the tube. This leads us to the uterus. The uterus is the size and shape of an inverted pear, superior to the urinary bladder. The fundus is the superior dome-shaped portion. The body is the central tapering portion, and then the cervix is the inferior narrow portion, which opens into the vagina. It's also known as the cervical canal, and it's about 1 centimeter long. Now we also see that we have the internal os. This is the opening of the cervix into the uterine cavity, and then we have the exterior or the external os, which is the opening to the cervix into the vagina. Now guys, the uterus is held into place by several ligaments as well. So let's talk a little bit about the histology of the uterus. The perimetrium is the outer layer. This is the part of the visceral. The myometrium is the middle layer. This is 3 layers of smooth muscle. And the endometrium is the inner layer. Many blood vessels are found here. It's very highly vascular. Stratum functionalis is this lines the uterine cavity. This is shed each month. The stratum bacillus is the deeper permanent layer, and it replaces the stratum functionalis each month after menstruation. This serves as part of the pathway for sperm when it's deposited into the vagina. The site of implantation of a fertilized egg and the development of the fetus during pregnancy occurs here in the uterus, and the uterus also plays a major role with its contractions during labor. Next is we have the vagina. This is located between the urinary bladder and the rectum, directed superiorly and posteriorly. The fornix is the vault which surrounds the vagina-cervix junction. The muscularis is a double layer of smooth muscle, and it's very elastic. The vaginal orifice may be partially covered by a thin fold of mucous membrane, and this is called the hymen. It serves as a passageway for menstrual flow. It receives sperm, and it forms the lower birth canal. Now, when we look here, we have the external genitalia of the female. This is called the vulva. We see that it has the mons pubis. This is a mound of adipose tissue. It cushions the pubic symphysis. The labia majora is the adipose tissue, sebaceous and sudoriferous glands. This is homologous to the scrotum. It has the same embryologic origin. The labia minora is hairless. It has little adipose tissue. It has many sebaceous glands. The clitoris is a small cylindrical mass of erectile tissue and nerves. This is homologous to the penis. The prepuce is the foreskin point where the labia minora join, covers the clitoris. The glans is the exposed portion of the clitoris, and the clitoris enlarges during sexual arousal. The vestibule is the area between the labia minora. The vaginal orifice is just posterior to the urethral orifice. The external urethral orifice is between the vaginal orifice and the clitoris. Now, there's also some glands that are important as well. Skene's glands is in either side of the urethral orifice. This is homologous to the prostate gland, and it secretes mucus. The Bartholin's gland is on either side of the vaginal orifice, and it's homologous to the Cowper's gland. It secretes mucus for lubrication during sexual arousal and intercourse. Alright, now let's talk about the formation of the egg, because this is a little different than what we see with the sperm. Oogenesis and follicular development. Oogenesis occurs in the ovaries. It's the formation of a single haploid secondary oocyte from the oogonia. It goes through meiosis 1, meiosis 2, and then it matures, and this is found in figure 28.14. Follicle cells surrounding the oocyte are also undergoing developmental changes, and this can be seen on figure 28.15. The sequence of follicular changes is primordial, primary, secondary, and mature follicles, and then you have the corpus luteum and the corpus albicans. This is in table 28.1. Now, if you look here, if we see that you see mitosis, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, a major difference you see here versus the formation of sperm is that it only forms one egg, one ova. The other is what we call polar bodies, and they just get disregarded. Once the egg is fertilized by the sperm, it then turns into a zygote because it returns the number to 2n back from n, because you get 23 chromosomes for mom, 23 chromosomes for dad, and it gives you your total of 46, which is the 2n. Alright, so now let's talk about the female reproductive cycle. The ovarian cycle, also known as the maturation of the ovum. There's also the uterine or menstrual cycle, which involves changes in the endometrium to prepare for the reception of a fertilized ovum. There's hormonal regulation to the female reproductive cycle. This is controlled by the gonadotropin releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. It stimulates the release of FSH and LH by the anterior pituitary. In females, the FSH causes the development of the ovarian follicles and the secretion of estrogens by the ovaries. LH is further development by ovarian follicles, ovulation, and the secretion of estrogen and progesterone by the ovaries. Now, estrogen has several important functions. It has the development and maintenance of the female reproductive structures, as well as secondary sex characteristics and the breast. It also increases protein anabolism and builds strong bones. It lowers blood cholesterol. Moderate levels of estrogen in the blood inhibit the release of the gonadotropin releasing hormones by the hypothalamus and secretion of LH and FSH by the anterior pituitary gland. Progesterone works with estrogen to prepare the endometrium for implantation and the mammary glands for milk synthesis. Relaxin is produced monthly to relax the uterus by inhibiting contractions, making it easier for a fertilized ovum to implant in the uterus. During pregnancy, relaxin relaxes the pubic symphysis and helps dilate the uterine cervix to facilitate delivery. Inhibits secretion of FSH as well as gonadotropin releasing hormone, and to a lesser extent LH. Now guys, if you notice here in the diagram, you can see how these levels of hormones throughout the menstrual cycle, they change. Okay, you can see like the rise of progesterone happens around day 14 and it stays high until about day 28. LH, you see, starts rising about day 10. It peaks around day 13, 14, and then it decreases. So you can see how these hormones go up and down throughout the female reproductive, or throughout the female menstrual cycle. Now, this particular diagram is showing you the ovarian cycle, what's happening with the ovaries and the egg, as well as what's happening in the uterine or menstrual cycle, the part of the uterus. Now, the female reproductive cycle may be divided into 4 phases. The menstrual cycle, also known as menstruation, is the first 5 days of the cycle. Small secondary follicles in each ovary begin to develop. The stratum functionalis layer of the endometrium is shed, discharging blood, tissue fluid, mucus, and epithelial cells. Then we see the pre-ovulatory phase or proliferative phase. This is more variable in length than the other phases. It can last from days 6 to 13 in a 28-day cycle. It's where primary follicles develop into secondary follicles, and a single secondary follicle, occasionally more than one, develops into a vascular ovarian follicle, and then it matures. This follicle produces a bulge on the surface of the ovary. The dominant follicle continues to increase its estrogen production under the influence of the releasing level or the increasing levels of LH. During this phase, the intrametrial repair starts to occur. Then we see ovulation. Ovulation is the rupture of the vesicular ovarian follicle with the release of the secondary oocyte into the pelvic cavity. This usually occurs around day 14 of a 28-day cycle. the high levels of estrogen during the last part of the pre-ovulatory phase exerts a positive feedback on both LH and the gonadotropin-releasing hormones to cause ovulation. The gonadotropin-releasing hormone produces or promotes the release of FSH and more LH by the anterior pituitary gland. The LH surge brings about the ovulation. Following ovulation, the vesicular ovarian follicle collapses and blood within it forms a clot. This is stimulated by LH. The corpus luteum secretes estrogen and progesterone. The post-ovulatory phase is the most constant in duration and lasts from days 15 through 28 in a 28-day cycle, the time between ovulation and the onset of the next menstrual period. Now, with reference to the ovaries, this phase of the cycle is also called the luteal phase, during which time estrogen and progesterone are secreted in large quantities by the corpus luteum. If fertilization and implantation does not occur, decreased secretion of progesterone and estrogen then initiates another menstrual phase. So then we re-enter the uterine and ovarian cycles. Okay, it starts over. But if fertilization and implantation do occur, the corpus luteum maintained by human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, from the developing placenta, it secretes estrogen and progesterone to support the pregnancy and breast development for lactation. So guys, in this particular picture, it kind of shows you what's happening in each of the phases.